Hello and welcome to week 3 of the LA Times College Football Roundtable. I'm your host, Ryan Kartje, our USC beat writer, joined as always by UCLA beat writer Ben Bolch and columnist Dylan Hernández. Thanks for joining us, guys. Ben, let's start with you. USC was off this week. UCLA probably wishes it was off this past week, with a loss to Indiana in its Big Ten debut. You wrote about a moment between Deshaun Foster and Martin Jarmond after the game. And meanwhile, in the other corner of the stadium, Indiana's coach, they're chanting his name. I thought that was such an evocative image. And I guess I wonder, coming out of that game in those final moments, what is the tone in the Rose Bowl for UCLA?
It's pretty much utter defeat, I would say. I will say that the crowd actually was very good for that game. The crowd might have been the best part of the game for UCLA fans because it was about 50,000. You add in the tarps and it didn't look absolutely dreadful. They were beaten down in every aspect of that game. And I think the problem with that is that it's like, where do you go from here, right? Indiana was supposed to be, besides Hawaii, probably the closest thing to a sure win on the schedule. And then they come out and give up 42 points. And then the offense just looks dreadful for a second week in a row, can only manage one touchdown against a defense that, it was decent, but it's not going to be a top probably half in the Big Ten defense. So, the question is, if you can't beat Indiana at home, where do you go from here? So that's kind of the feeling of deflation I felt at the Rose Bowl, and I will say it's carried over to practice. These first 2 days, I've never seen two quieter practices. We only get to watch about 20 minutes, but man, it's been listless. It's been deflated, and that they need to change that if they're going to do anything this season.
Dylan, what do they do to change that?
They're not going to. I mean, they're just gonna get the crap kicked out of them all year. And then, at some point decisions are gonna have to be made, right? I mean, I keep going back to this. I mean, I just don't know how like Jarmon could have expected anything different, right? Again, you just brought in an inexperienced coach, this being his first job. I mean, think of it from that standpoint, right? Just like imagine the first time you've ever done this and you're coming in, to a team that's already been struggling anyway, and now moving into like a different conference. Like I just don't understand like how anybody thought that this could have worked.
Let me
So
jump in there and tell you what I saw there. I mean, I think he prioritized keeping this team together, which I think we're seeing why that probably was not the best idea. I mean, they didn't have many transfers. They kept most of the guys that Chip Kelly brought in, but I mean, the ceiling on this team right now feels like 4 wins, right? So, what does that do? And they're going to have a massive loss of their best players after this year. So, unless they can have something to sell going forward and get NIL money, my understanding is that's stagnant right now. They're going to be in a big world of trouble going into next year.
what it is setting up for, I guess, is for a young, ambitious coach to come in and, hey, I can, right, completely like redefine a program. Because this is kind of like, I mean, even among like all the bad UCLA teams that we've seen like in recent decades, this is probably as bad as it's been, right? I mean, this is completely hopeless.
I mean, I think that the Indiana game was interesting because we saw on the other sideline exactly what UCLA needs. A dynamic coach with a track record of success and program building who's winning in year one. Today, with the transfer portal, you can bring in a new coach and he can bring in, 10, 15, 20 guys with him. And that's kind of part of the package now. So it's not like you need to say, oh, if we change coaches where it's going to be a 3-year rebuild. No, you can win in year one in college football in 2024, and Indiana's proving it.
It's really to a point where I almost just feel bad for Deshaun Foster. I feel like he was put in a position to fail. We've seen this story before. Go back to 2016, 2015, USC, Clay Helton steps in as, someone who the players loved. They wanted to see more order. They wanted someone from within to keep the players and the team together. And, that worked, I guess, for a little bit until it didn't. But I'm of the opinion that you never hire the interim. And I think we're kind of seeing exactly the pitfalls of that.
You saw LSU, right? They're not a dominant juggernaut or anything by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, they struggled against Nicholls State. They, had to pull it out against South Carolina on the road, which, is not the easiest thing in the world, but it's also not beating Alabama. So I feel like if UCLA is going to kind of surprise some people and do anything with this season, they have to at least have a decent show. I mean, maybe not win the game, but they have to at least have a decent showing and make it a competitive game into the second half this week, right? I mean, if they lose this game in blowout fashion, then they come home and play Oregon at the Rose Bowl and go to Penn State. I mean, you can just see, people really checking out at that point, right?
Yeah, currently more than 3 touchdown underdogs, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it started at 22.5, and I think it's gone up to 25 something was the last time I checked. So
Yeah, I mean, and to be honest, that's the way I kind of see it. I don't think, right. I mean, SC had to really battle to get that win there. That quarterback's pretty good. They got a couple of decent receivers, got some size on the line. I mean, I do think UCLA is just going to get blown out here. And, frankly, at this point, right, in a couple more weeks, you might as well just go cover Claremont McKenna or something. I'm serious, right? Because I think you're right. In just a couple more weeks, this thing's going to be like over. I mean, it feels over now, and now it's just like, it's almost like ruin porn, right? We're just sitting here just to see how bad this thing's going to get.
Right, Ryan, let me throw it back to you. Do you see a way that UCLA can show something this week, even if it's not a win, that can kind of change people's opinions about Deshaun Foster and the possibilities for the rest of the season?
Well, I'll say this. I agree with you that I don't think LSU is that good, but I think UCLA is really that bad. So I think it's going to have a hard time. What is a moral victory in this situation? A close game that comes down to the end? We haven't seen anything from UCLA to suggest that will be the case, especially on the road. Now, there's always a chance, there's some motivation coming out of, a very difficult start to the season. But you talking about the mood at practice, I think is pretty telling. Like, there's not a fire that's been lit. And Deshaun Foster, I mean, he's never had to light that fire within a team. So that's a hard thing to do. That's one of the hardest jobs as a coach, to pull a team out of a slump. So we're really going to see what he's made of, I think, in this time coming up.
Yeah, I will say the most concerning thing, if I'm a UCLA fan watching this team, is they had eight starters back on offense, and Ethan Garbers and TJ Harding look worse than they did last year. I mean, those are 2 of your best players, and they completely lost out there. And then, Eric Bieniemy's offense, meanwhile, is not prioritizing the strength that he has, which is this really deep and talented core of receivers. They're not being targeted. They're running routes to the same part of the field. It's just been a jumbled mess. So, it's just kind of a head scratcher as to what's going on here. I think there is enough talent to have a 5 or 6 win season, but it's just not being utilized properly right now. And that's got to be the biggest concern if you're a UCLA fan.
Well, there's a very big game going on with the other team across town in Ann Arbor this weekend. USC, starting its Big Ten slate with the defending national champions. Now, Michigan has not looked like the defending national champions through the first 3 weeks. Beat Arkansas State by only 10 last week. Quarterback Davis Warren, who started the first 3 games, looked awful. As a Michigan graduate who watched some of that Davis Warren film, I would have been chomping at the bit if I was USC's defense. Now, this week, Sharon Moore, Michigan's coach, announces that they're changing quarterbacks to Alex Orji, who is more of a running threat than a passing threat. I'm completely baffled as to why they would announce this change on a Monday to give Lincoln Riley and Danton Lynn a whole week to prepare for this. But, at this point, USC doesn't totally know what to expect from Michigan's offense. But I think we're going to see, a game in which Michigan runs the ball 50 times, like minimum. So I think we're really going to see whether this USC team has the mettle in its defensive front, has the patience offensively to, keep running the ball in spite of going up against a very strong Michigan front that could be one of the best they face all season. I personally think this game is going to be very close. And I think Michigan's probably a little better than people have seen. I'm not sure USC is as good as people have seen, but we're going to decide both, I think, this coming week. Dylan, when you look at that matchup, like what is the first thing that comes to mind for you?
Yeah, it's a Michigan run against the SC run defense, right? And I think, again, you can't take too much, from the Utah State game, but against LSU, they did a really good job, keeping the LSU run game contained. I mean, Miller Moss obviously kind of came out big in that LSU game, and I'm kind of expecting something along those lines, right? I don't think they're going to be able to kind of run the ball at will like they did against Utah State. Obviously, it'll probably be a little bit closer to like the LSU thing where, right, it's kind of more of a battle. And I kind of have a feeling this is going to be like the Miller Moss, like real, like kind of coming out party.
And if USC wins this game, I think it will be because Miller Moss just played, a very sharp, like accurate game. I think he is going to need to get the ball out quickly, which he's done very successfully through the first 2 weeks. One of the fastest triggers in all of college football. Dylan, prediction time. Obviously UCLA, its back's against the wall against LSU. I feel like it's maybe too lopsided to even make a prediction. Can they even cover the spread, I guess?
No, they're going to lose by like 40. They're as cooked as those alligators that they're going to be eating out in the parking lot before people are going to be eating before the game. This is going to get ugly, man.
Ben, can they cover the spread?
They could theoretically, but I'm going to say no. I'm going to say LSU is going to win big. It's one of those things where you have to until I see evidence to the contrary, you just have to believe that this is going to keep going the way it's going. Maybe they'll surprise us and show something Saturday in Baton Rouge, but until they do, it's going to keep being ugly.
And when it comes to USC, I like I said, I think this is going to be a very close game in Ann Arbor. At this point, it's so hard to predict this game, if only because we don't really know what to expect out of Michigan's quarterback, Alex Orji. But, if Lincoln Riley and Dan Lynn are able to have the sort of game plan that they had in Vegas against LSU, I think they can win this game. I think it'll come down to a field goal difference towards the end. I think it could flip either way, but assuming Miller Moss doesn't make too many mistakes, I think USC comes in and wins this game in Ann Arbor, which catapults them into the college football playoff conversation, the national championship conversation. Suddenly, all doors are open.
I think it'll be a little more than I think they'll win somewhat comfortably, right? It'll be I'll say like around like maybe 10 points, where. It's one of those games even where the score maybe doesn't quite indicate, right? I think they'll be kind of like comfortably ahead for a lot of the game, right? Or maybe kind of pull away, early, like in the second half, and they'll kind of like comfortably kind of cruise to like a 10-point win. Yeah, I mean, just having seen Michigan, having seen USC, I just think SC's the better team right now. They have more ways to score, and again, I think the defense has just been, again, they're not gonna make mistakes, I think. Right, that puts themselves like in a bad position.
Two football teams heading in the exact opposite direction, and not too far away from each other in LA. That's going to wrap it up for week 3 of our college football roundtable. Lot to talk about next week when we join. We'll see you then.